a crucial part of the study of constitutional law is this, or the Bill of Rights, is the matter of freedom of religion, especially that we have this notion of how critical our citizens are on the affairs of the state, yet are also mindful of their religious obligations and rights. Before going into the detail of what the freedom of religion or of faith includes, is this discussion or consideration of this crucial aspect of the separation of the church and the state. This is what you call secularism. The idea of secularism, or the separation of the church and the state, makes sense because of certain reasons. Actually, we may say that one of the reasons was because of our experience in history, where the church may have influenced greatly the affairs of the state. Well, until now, we might even say that the decisions of the state considers also the sensitivities of the faithful. But there are more reasons than that. Among them are freedom of religion, the equality and fairness that the state must assure, the prevention of religious tyranny, the preservation of democracy, and the promotion of pluralism. As for the freedom of religion, this separation ensures that the individuals are free to practice their religion without interference or coercion from the government. It prevents the state from imposing or favoring any particular religion, or allowing people to worship or not to worship, even for atheism, according to their own beliefs. Equality and fairness implies that by separating the institution of religion and government, societies can aim to create a fair and equitable system where individuals of all faiths or of no faiths are treated equally under the law. This prevents religious discrimination and ensures that the public policy is not influenced by religious doctrine. This also prevents religious tyranny, because throughout history, when governments have been closely intertwined with religious institutions, there has often been an abuse of power and suppression of dissenting beliefs. Separation of the church and the state helps prevent the dominance of one religion over others and guard against the tyranny that can arise from religious zealotry. Democracy is also preserved. In a secular state, political decisions are made based on reason, evidence, and the will of the people rather than religious doctrine. This helps to preserve the democratic process and ensure that laws and policies are guided by the collective interest of the society rather than the dictates of a particular faith. It also promotes pluralism, this secularism, because separating the church and the state fosters a diverse and pluralistic society where people of different religious beliefs or of none can coexist peacefully. It encourages tolerance, dialogue, and mutual respect among individuals with varying worldviews. In the Constitution, we have the dictates or expectations of the separation between the church and the state. Initially, this was adopted as a policy by virtue of the requirements of the Tidings-McDuffie Law, which called for the drafting of the 1935 Constitution, which includes such a policy, Bill of Rights, and the separation of a church and the state. We have the 1935 Constitution that provides for several guarantees that would allow free exercise of religion. This includes the exemption of the church from realty taxes, the restriction of the appropriation for churches, the allocation of the budget, the establishment of religion, the respect for religious freedom, and then the optional teaching of religion in public schools. However, the uh, explicit declaration of the separation of the church and the state came under the 1973 Constitution, together with the additional provisions on that no religious sect may be registered as a political party, and that the ownership of the schools by the religious order are exempt from are reserved for Filipino ownership, no? Okay. So except for those who are which are operated by the religious institutions. So on the matter of religion and the separation of the church and the state under the 1987 Constitution, we have Section 5 that says that no law shall be made respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. The free exercise and enjoyment of religious profession and of worship without discrimination or preference shall be forever allowed. No religious test shall be required for the exercise of civil and political rights. Before we enter into that, the 1987 Constitution in its existence have been beleaguered and attacked by questions on whether the interference of the church and of the church of the affairs of the state still can be considered as appropriate. We must remember that under the 1987 Constitution, jurisprudence mostly emphasizes on the involvement, on the interference of the state with the affairs of the church, but not the other way around. Meaning, the state is prohibited from meddling with the affairs of the church, but the church, like any citizen, the church, like any person, is free to air out its political views, even endorse a candidate. Okay? If they want to, there is nothing illegal with that. That's part of their religious freedom. So again, it's one way. When you speak of non-involvement under the 1987 Constitution, the non-involvement of the church and the state with each other primarily refers to the state's lack of constitutional right to interfere with the affairs of the church, but not the other way around. So again, under the 1987 Constitution, there is the primary guarantee of non-establishment and free exercise. The non-establishment clause says that no law shall be made respecting or an establishment of a religion, and that no law shall be made prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Let's dissect these provisions. First, the non-establishment clause says that jurisprudence will just simply say that there is the prohibition of excessive state entanglement with the religious institutions, and that the state is prohibited from endorsing or approving a religion. There is an unavoidable entanglement in a way between the state and the church, because the state is also the church is also a citizen, an entity of the state. No? It's always there. But what the Constitution prohibits is excessive entanglement. The state also cannot endorse or approve or establish a religion. Okay, there are cases on this, foremost on favoring a religion, which is endorsing a religion. This case of request of Muslim employees in the different courts, whereby the Supreme Court mandated in the request to give exemptions to certain Muslim brothers for prayer. Supreme Court established that the constitutional guarantee on religious freedom terminated disabilities. It did not create new privileges. It gave religious liberty, not civil immunity. Its essence is freedom from conformity to religious dogma, and not freedom from conformity to law because of religious dogma. Members of the church must still follow the law, because the law did not create exceptions. The law did not create privileges. It only guaranteed the rights of the religious. Okay. The church cannot even submit to the court interpretations, the request for interpretations of how they should run their churches, no? In the case of Taruk versus Bishop, on the matter of the excommunication or expulsion of members, the Supreme Court said that the expulsion or excommunication of members of a religious institution or organization is a matter best left to the discretion of its officials and the laws and canons of the said institution or organization. It continues that and the matters are ecclesiastical, which are outside the province of civil courts. So when there is the exclusion of church members, yung pagtiwalag, it's not for the court to determine, but it's purely religious. It's a case of Islamic Dawa versus Executive Secretary, where the Supreme Court struck down policy which allowed for the Office of Muslim Affairs by virtue of EO 46 to determine what are halal for our brother Muslims. By arrogating to itself the task of issuing halal certifications, the state has in effect forced Muslims to accept the state's interpretation of the Quran and Sunnah on halal food. So, while the state cannot interfere with the affairs of the church, please be mindful that in the case of Navarra versus Comelec, the Supreme Court highlighted that in no way, however, are the members and even the leaders of the church immune from the mandates of law or the regulation or policies of the state. Only that the state cannot enforce or implement itself in hindi niya pwedeng ipilit ang sarili niya sa mga church affairs. But definitely, members of the church, leaders of the church are not exempt from the mandate of the law. They can even be called to Senate inquiries, no? If required by the Senate by virtue of subpoena. No? This case of Soriano versus LaGuardia, this very brilliant pastor, Soriano, Brother Eli Soriano, his program, Ang Dating Daan, was subject of government regulation because of certain utterances which are not meant for free broadcast TV. So his show, though religious, is not exempt from government regulation. So for schools, not to endorse students or religion to students, but the state must respect faith in schools, no? As representatives of the state, educational institutions are bound to safeguard the religious freedom of their students. Thus, to such an end, our schools carry the responsibility to restrict its own academic liberty should they collide with constitutionally guaranteed or preferred rights. While the state cannot establish religion, it has the obligation to respect the same. Establishing a religion, respecting an establishment of religion, this is the principle of accommodation or benevolent neutrality. Our churches, both Muslims and Islamic, for example, mosques have loudspeakers sometimes. Can they be stopped? Can they be prevented? That's a benevolent neutrality or accommodation. They are allowed so because that's a recognition of the reality that some governmental measures may not be imposed on certain portions of the population for the reason that these measures are contrary to their religious beliefs. Accommodating the use of government facilities for the holding of masses, like this case of Valenciano. Okay. Among that, yung accommodation is allowing members of the Jehovah's Witnesses to not participate in the flag ceremony. Yung permission of schools also are of certain religious groups to be excluded from the closed shop policies in the workplace, no? Okay. Operation of sectarian schools other than those established by religious groups and mission boards shall be owned solely by citizens of the Philippines. Remember that. That is not establishing a religion. That is simply respect for the mission of the schools or of the religious institutions or churches. Can religion be taught in public school? Is not establishing a religion. The civil code allows it. The Constitution permits it. Religion may be taught in public schools subject to the following requisites. Should be consented in writing, taught within school regular school hours. Instructors are designated and approved by the proper religious authorities and without expense from the school. This provision prevents appropriations for the school, making use of the resources, requiring students to stay more than what they are required to, in public schools, and consent, of course. Even abroad, praying in a public school, teaching of the story of the Garden of Eve may be subject of a lawsuit. No? What about private schools? Private schools can teach religion without the consent of parents or the students for as long as, upon enrollment, of course, that is already consent. When students enroll in a private school where religion is being taught, especially in a religious school, a Catholic school or whatever school, no, like New Era for the Iglesia de Cristo members, the JMC for the School of Pastor Kiboloy, Muslim schools. When you go to these private schools and religion is being taught, you are expected to learn them because that is part of their approved curriculum. But for public schools, there has to be consent. For private schools, enrollment means consent to the curriculum. Tax exemptions, this is not establishment, no, but this allows for a greater exercise of faith. Churches, parsonages, convents, appurtenant thereto, and mosques, including improvements actually directly and exclusively used for religious purposes, shall be exempt from taxation. This is a case of Roman Catholic Bishop versus Provincial Board. This includes facilities annexed to the church used for religious purposes. Tolentino versus Secretary of Finance. Read this case on the matter of the imposition of the value-added tax for the distribution of the Bible. It says that the VAT is not a license tax. It is not tax on the exercise of a privilege, much less a constitutional right. It is imposed on the sale, barter, lease, or exchange of goods or properties, or the sale or exchange of services, and on the lease of properties purely for revenue purposes. Remember that this is different from American Bible Society case, which is also part of this video. This refers not to the license, but on the taxes for the sale or distribution of Bibles. In the American Bible Society, which we'll take up later on, it refers to license fee tax collection, where license is not required for the exercise of a constitutional right. Public aid to religion in Section 29. No resource of the state may be given to the church or any of its leaders, except when they are assigned to the armed forces, penal institution, or government orphanage or leprosarium, primarily for me because they are employed there. No. So government aid to religion may be allowable if it's for secular purpose. The primary effect must not inhibit but advance religion, and there must be no excessive entanglement. This is the principle of double effect. Public aid may be given if aid to religion is only incidental and not the primary purpose for the aid, no? Or for example, when you provide security for the Pope is the head of state. When he comes to visit the Philippines, as also the head of the state, resources are poured in for his visit, not to support his church, but to support tourism, to secure the people visiting the country and the crowd in the area where the Pope is. Also for the other faiths, like the anniversary of the INC, where the membership is also massive. They deploy, we deploy, state deploys policemen. It involves expense from the church, the state, but it's allowed because it's the part of the primary obligation is not to support the church, but to secure the peace of the premises. This case of Aglipay versus Ruiz is interesting because commemorative stamps were released, no? For the 33rd International Eucharistic Congress back in, I think this was in the 60s, 30s. Supreme Court said that you cannot object to this because the church did not benefit from the proceeds, nor was the money coming from the church. It's only commemorative. It may draw tourism, no? It may draw tourists. It may even mark a significant milestone in the Philippines, but it's not for the purpose of generating or income for the church or promoting a church. It's a case of Manosca versus CA, questioning the marker for the late founder of the Iglesia de Cristo, Brother Felix Manalo. The question was struck down because spending for this marker is not a violation of that religious that restriction on supporting a faith or a religion, but it's rather commemorating the undeniable contribution of Manalo to the Philippine history and culture. It's not about faith. It's about his contribution to our culture and our history. So the free exercise clause, this time, no law shall be made prohibiting the free exercise of religion. This case of request of Muslim employees, no, is significant, where Justice Isagani Cruz highlighted the distinction between freedom to believe and the freedom to act on one's belief. When you talk about freedom to believe, this is the freedom to harbor in your heart, in your soul, in your minds, whatever philosophy or religion. It's yours. Nothing and nobody can question that. Okay? But when you express your beliefs that is subject to government or state regulation, if the expression of your beliefs comes contrary to public policy, public order, morals, or good faith, or good customs. For example, what if your faith requires animal sacrifice or human sacrifice? The state could intervene. So the freedom to believe is different from the freedom to act on one's belief. The state is more interested in looking at your freedom to act on your belief. Flag salute, Ebralina versus Division Superintendent, on the freedom of the belief of the Jehovah's Witnesses, where they are not compelled to salute the Philippine flag because of the primacy of their religious freedom over the requirement of saluting the flag or singing the national anthem. There is also religious freedom in the propagation of religious doctrine. That's why a license fee is not required, because a license fee is required when there is an exercise of a privilege. But this is propagating religious doctrines. That is a matter of constitutional right and not a privilege. This case of Victoriano versus Elizalde Rope Workers, mentioned a while back, on the exemption of certain members of the church from joining a union shop or a closed shop union for the reason that their faiths are respected. On the matter of this freedom, upholding the right of the members of the INC to not join labor unions for being contrary to their beliefs does not bar them, however, from forming their own unions. Disqualification from government office. Can priests run for office? In the case of Pamil versus Teleron, it's not that truly clear. But in the opinions, in the case, it says that a priest minister, once elected or appointed to a municipal office, necessarily enjoys salary pertaining to that office. This would be a direct violation to that prohibition. Appropriating. I think I disagree with this opinion because it's not appropriating for a religion, but it's appropriating because of the service given to government by somebody who happens to be a priest. Then another opinion, dissenting opinion, the justice said that I cannot imagine how a duly ordained minister of God would whose sacred life mission is supposed to serve God and to advance and defend the interests of the church above all other interests, can properly act as such government official committed to enforce state policies which would conflict with fundamental tenets of the church. Like the RH bill, for example, di ba? So how can that be, or RH law, how can that be implemented by for example, a barangay worker who his religion is contrary to that belief, or that law contrary to the belief of faith of the barangay worker. But can priests, for example, Catholic priests, can they run for public office? Under the canon law, they are not allowed. Clerics are forbidden to assume public office, which entail a participation of the exercise of civil power. Okay, that's canon 285. That's canon 285. So I hope you learned something from this video. Thank you for listening.